Okay, I'm not gonna lie. This is way harder than I anticipated. But here I am at Veterans Memorial Park. Can you see all the cool stuff behind me? Um, in Leander to do your lecture about question number 3. There's bicyclers here. There's also those dangerous birds that attacked me yesterday. So hopefully they won't come back because I didn't bring any food. All right, we're on question number 4. Number 4, which is about Ronald Reagan. And the goal here is to give you a nice overview of the Reagan presidency in a very patriotic setting, because Reagan was a very patriotic sort of fellow. Also, between lecture number 3 and 4, I talked to my dad about history, because it's what nerds do. And my dad said to remind you that Richard Nixon had good reason to feel a little paranoid about the election in 72 because he felt like he had been robbed in 1960, which he probably had, and which is why he kind of retreated and said, you won't have Richard Nixon to kick around anymore. So we're about to see some people who have no interest in history at all. Okay, so they don't care, but they are dressed like superheroes. So here's the deal about Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan comes in at a time where we need our patriotism refreshed. And his campaign slogan for round 1 is, well, at least in the commercials, is it's morning in America. Like everything's fresh and new and our best days are ahead of us. And he says cool stuff like the 6 most dangerous words in the English language are, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. Or he says the most dangerous words. And he also says that, let's see, best days are ahead of us, they're not behind us. Oh, and he asks you if you're better off now than you were 4 years ago, which you're not because you're broke and you're jobless and the interest rates are high and dang, life is hard. So his goal is to make you have some optimism and to also get elected, and he's pretty good at both. He also will use that same "Are you better off 4 years? Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?" slogan in round 2 because, in general, you probably were better off. Okay, here's the stuff. So with Reagan, you have a return to traditional values. Pro-marriage, pro-family, moral majority, all the Christian religious people are kind of back, involved again, and they like him. He is going to make being pro-life an issue. He's going to really encourage people of religious backgrounds to get involved in government again. And this group, the Moral Majority, which is really a coalition of conservative Catholics, evangelical Christians, and Mormons, and some Jewish folks as well, to get involved in politics. So we have a return to traditional values. He also is going to have an economic program, which people will refer to as Reaganomics, or sometimes they refer to as trickle-down economics. And the plan here is to deregulate as many things as possible, to lower corporate taxes, but also individual income taxes from the highest rate. I believe the highest rate was in the 70s, which is pretty high, to be honest. I mean, I don't make several $1 million a year, but if I did, I'm not sure I would want to pay 72%. But to get everybody down into the 30s and 20% for their income tax. And this does perhaps stimulate the economy. We also do a bit of government spending on conventional military, and we ramp up some higher tech military stuff, surveillance kind of things, Star Wars, Strategic Defense Initiative, which your book talks about a little, and the video will talk about a lot more. Also, I give you links to a really short video, which is a couple of minutes, and then a super long video, which is like 45 minutes. And if you're a Reagan fan, you would love that thing. Now, it's Williamson County. We name stuff after Reagan, so maybe you should look into that. We would name schools. We rename roads. Reagan's super popular, and there's honestly good reason. He's a nice fellow. He's a really good speaker. He presides over the end of the Soviet Union, and people at the time period gave him credit. Historians struggle with that a little bit more, but oh gosh, what else do we want to say? I'm sorry, I can't see the screen at all, so I'm hoping you at least are getting some of my face and not these dangerous birds. I feel like I'm in an Alfred Hitchcock movie, but we'll keep going. So return to traditional values. As far as I mentioned tax reform, he deregulated lots and lots of industries. One of the very first things he does as well is when he becomes president, the first day he's inaugurated, they let the Iranian hostages go, so that kind of gives him a boost as far as looking tough. And it's kind of, I'd mentioned before, kind of the final slap in the face to the Carter administration. He also pretty quickly will tell the air traffic controllers who had threatened to go on strike with their union that if they did so, that he would fire every one of them and make them ineligible to be rehired. These are the folks that help you land planes and make sure that people who are taking off and landing don't do so at the same time and people take turns. They're fairly important. So they did not believe that Reagan would fire them all, and they were incorrect. So they went on strike, and it becomes a very exciting time to fly. Now, the truth is we don't have a whole lot more crashes, but we do have a lot more near misses. And the air traffic controllers who quit are not eligible for rehire until President Clinton says that they are, and that's 12 years later. So by then they have new jobs. If you're wondering where do we get new ones, well, we trained them. They brought in the military and the National Guard to help do that. So that kind of further reinforces Reagan's reputation as being a guy who's tough on stuff. And if he says he's going to do something, he's going to follow through. One of the things he does that will be somewhat controversial, there's my hair, savings and loan bailout. A lot of savings and loans, which are like banks with lower thresholds of regulation for how they give out loans, so they can give out riskier loans, did a lot of that, and they end up collapsing, so the government bails them out in a series of what becomes, the beginning of corporate bailouts. You saw some of that in the 70s as well. I think it was Chrysler that got bailed out in the 70s. You'll see more of it in the 80s, a bunch more of it in the 90s, the too big to fail idea. With foreign policy, because I know I've already talked quite a while, I need to get to foreign policy. So foreign policy, Reagan calls the Soviet Union the evil empire and talks about how communism is very bad. At the same time, behind the scenes, he's negotiating with the Soviet Union. He is making sure, he's making sure to talk with Gorbachev, who is the new leader of the Soviet Union, whose policies are glasnost and perestroika, is supposed to be more of an openness and westernness about how everything is run in the Soviet Union. What's going on, and Reagan understands this, is they're running out of money. We have been in an arms race with the Soviet Union for a very long time. Our economy is much larger, so we're able to keep up with it. They are not, and that is a problem for them. So they're going broke. At the same time they're going broke, we're kind of threatening them and ramping up some military production. They feel like they have to keep up, then they can't. So when it becomes very obvious to people in our administration that they can't, not necessarily publicly, then we start to have arms negotiation talks, which are incredibly successful and far-reaching, to the point where we really start to negotiate getting rid of all nuclear weapons at Reykjavik in Iceland, and it's a fairly big deal. It's a huge deal, to be honest. Historians really struggle with if they should give credit to Reagan or not for this. I would say at least to give him credit for recognizing that this is what was going on, or at least having people in his administration who recognized it. At the same time, we are really messing with the Caribbean and Central America. We are declaring war on little bitty islands, the Falkland. We don't really declare war, but we're launching attacks on the Falkland Islands. We're intervening with the CIA. We've got the Iran-Contra affair, which is where we sell weapons to Iran, who, hostage crisis not too far before that. But we sell them weapons to avoid something called the Boland Amendment, which meant that we couldn't fund anti-communist revolutions in Central and South America without going through the Congress. So we didn't want to go through the Congress, so we sold these weapons to Iran, used the funding to give money to the Contras, who are the counter-revolutionaries in Nicaragua. We get caught, and Reagan goes on television and says, hey, that never happened. And then when he finds out it did, he goes back about a month later and says, oops, which makes it look like he doesn't really know what's going on. If you're wondering who was in charge of that thing, Lieutenant Colonel from the Marines, they have a flag over here somewhere, gets in trouble for it. Oliver North, his punishment is a show on Fox News. That's not really his punishment, but he does have to retire, but he doesn't have to go to jail. Now, probably he didn't have enough connections to do this. I'd always kind of thought that maybe a guy who used to be the head of the CIA and an ambassador, that might be George Bush, maybe had something to do with it, but I don't know stuff like that for sure. The Reagan administration, incredibly popular, leads to the Bush administration, also leads to Democrats becoming more conservative. I am going to stop for a couple of reasons. One, it's 150 degrees out here, and two, there's a whole bunch of bugs and I'm getting bitten. So, and I've probably talked a long time. Now, I can't see the screen, so it may take a minute for me to turn this off. But I hope you enjoyed looking at Veterans Park. Let me see if I can show you a little bit more of it. Or is that my face? It's probably my face. But Veterans Park is really pretty. I'm on the Parks Board in Leander, so I like the parks. And I'm thinking I may take you on a tour of parks next week for my lectures. All right, I'm going to try to turn this off. You guys have a lovely evening, and nice to see you. Bye.